to quickly thank Filmora for sponsoring this video and supporting the art community. Filmora 9 is a super easy to use video editor, perfect for beginners. It's actually what I used to make the intro to this video that you're watching now. It supports all the features you need to edit a professional looking video with so many added effects, filters, and transitions to give your videos a fun artistic edge. They also offer many amazing royalty-free effects in their film stocks page. This new watercolor effect is my absolute favorite. In fact, I think I might actually borrow this for all of my video title screens moving forward. If you want to try out Filmora or film stocks for yourself, check out the video description for links to download a free trial. Okay, now on to the video. This painting was done primarily with watercolors and colored pencils, but for today's voiceover, I wanted to talk about some of my recent revelations regarding negative comments and criticism. For a more comprehensive 30-minute tutorial with corresponding step-by-step work-in-progress photos, you can check out my Patreon page at patreon.com/happydartist. Okay, I'm just going to dive right into today's topic because, as some of you may know, lately I've been actively working on dealing with some creative burnout and a lot of self-criticism, which has led me to reflect on external criticism as well. And I'm just super excited to share my new insights with you all. I know not everyone may agree with me, and I know each person's situation is unique. So as usual, my disclaimer is to just please take my words with a grain of salt. In no way am I pressuring everyone to think that my way or my opinions are the most correct way to do things. And as usual, I welcome any unique angles or differing opinions that you can offer to this discussion, even if it disagrees with my sentiments. Anyways, lately, I've realized that as I get older, I'm beginning to notice a change in the way that I process external critique, specifically in the form of negative comments online. When I first started to share my artwork on social media and on the internet, it was the first time in my life where I exposed such a personal side of me to the general public. Like most, if not all other artists, it's hard to separate my personal life from the art that I create, since I believe that art is like a visual manifestation of the artist's internal monologue and their innermost secrets. So due to the personal nature of the creative process, it's hard not to take things personally when you receive a negative piece of feedback. Sharing your art can be a terrifyingly vulnerable experience that puts you at risk for being critiqued in a public forum. And though I've been fortunate enough to have found an overwhelmingly positive and encouraging art community over the years, I still get an occasional negative comment every now and then. And just like any person with a social media presence, big or small, these negative comments can affect me, and they can also vary in degrees of intensity. There are mean-spirited trolls who just use hate and vitriol to elicit a reaction for attention, maybe. There are people who aren't mean-spirited but will offer unsolicited critique that can at times exacerbate our insecurities. And there are also sometimes people who have good intentions by giving constructive criticism because they genuinely want to help you improve. And of course, all sorts of varying degrees in between. When I first encountered negative feedback, I didn't know how to digest the opinions of complete strangers, so I rejected them. Sometimes even calm, objectively phrased criticism could trigger so much insecurity and self-doubt that I thought the best way to handle it was just to ignore it. And any negative feedback, big or small, hateful or reasonable, I would just throw it all into one giant ignore bucket. And I thought that by disregarding all the comments and opinions of my critics, I would be able to shield myself from negativity and insecurity, and I would be able to improve and grow in a healthy way that was removed from all the toxicity of social media trolls and online haters, quote unquote. But what I realized recently was that I'm not immune from negativity just because I block out negative feedback from others. Artists are our own worst critics at times, and we always have plenty of self-induced negativity brewing from within. So it's impossible to avoid negativity, period. And I feel like sometimes the feedback that offends us the most is the kind of feedback that confirms our deepest insecurities. If someone said something that even remotely offended me, I would deem that opinion invalid or false. But negative feedback is offensive by nature. I mean, no one enjoys listening to others point out their flaws and weaknesses. For most of us, the immediate and visceral response to criticism is to defend ourselves and reject those opposing opinions. It's all part of human nature. But I realized that by muting all sources of external critique, I was also missing out on some important opportunities for growth and self-reflection. We can't improve without first accepting our flaws and taking accountability of our mistakes. Even though I knew there were many things I still needed to learn and improve upon in my art, I still hated it when people pointed out flaws in my work. I used to just write those people off as nitpicky naysayers who didn't know what they were talking about, or people who just didn't understand my style, etc., etc. But now, if I sit down and try to interpret their feedback as constructive rather than offensive, I realize that hidden beneath the facade of a hate comment is actually a useful morsel of knowledge. I used to be embarrassed whenever I was caught being wrong, but now I realize that being wrong is actually something to be grateful for. For example, if I've been mispronouncing a word incorrectly my whole life and someone corrects me, even if they did it a bit rudely, I can still dig out the helpful bit of their feedback and use it to learn how to pronounce the word properly from now on. If I had blocked out this type of unsolicited feedback, sure, I could have avoided the sting of feeling offended or being caught making a mistake, but I would also still be mispronouncing that word forever. So rather than trying to change the rest of the world to sugarcoat their words to me in the nicest, most digestible way possible, I discovered that it's a lot easier to just update my own way of ingesting and interpreting feedback. I could implement a series of steps, kind of like a mental flowchart, to help me sort out the feedback and filter through the offensive bits so that I can access the helpful bits. So nowadays, whenever I receive negative comments, I have a thought process that generally goes like this. I first ask myself, is this just a troll comment in the form of attention-seeking insults just to provoke a reaction out of me? If so, then easy. No need to even be offended by a comment like this because it's essentially meaningless and not even worth my time. I equate these types of troll comments to a random crazy person yelling at me on the street. Just ignore it and move on. If it's not a platitude of malicious remarks, I then ask myself, is this comment simply a difference in opinion? For example, if I enjoy using oils and someone says, oils are the worst medium, acrylic is way better. Or if I enjoy painting fantasy portraits and someone says, fantasy art isn't real art, photorealistic landscapes are the way better option. So in these cases, it's clear that we just each have our own preference and no one's opinion should be superior to the other. They are just different. I can easily avoid being offended by these types of comments because I can just agree to disagree. But if the comment doesn't fall into the troll category or the differing opinions category, then it's likely some sort of unsolicited feedback, such as someone critiquing my drawing and painting skills, my compositions and proportions, etc. These types of comments are some of the most difficult to navigate because they're not just a meaningless insult that you can easily brush off. There are sometimes grains of truth to them that can confirm our worst fears and trigger our deepest insecurities, especially when a lot of artists are already our own worst critics, as I mentioned before. And these types of comments tend to exacerbate those tendencies to be too hard on ourselves, which a lot of artists already struggle with. But regardless of how these types of comments are phrased, I will try to trim out the subjective tone of the words to try to find the objective meaning behind the words. If someone says, "Ew, your anatomy proportions really need some work. Your subjects look deformed," I can easily be offended by the rude tone of the sentence and reject this entire comment, maybe even actively retaliating against the comment by insisting the opposite, by insisting that my proportions are perfect and it's just a style choice and that they don't know what they're talking about. But if I mentally rephrase the comment to be more objective and less emotional, I can make it go from, "Ew, your proportions suck," to, "You could use some more practice on human anatomy to make your subjects look better proportioned, even when you stylize them to be non-realistic." The second statement is a lot more easily received, even if it's not literally the way that the person phrased it. I can rephrase it myself in my brain so that I can be more receptive to it. And then once I've done that, I can ask myself, do I agree with this statement? Could I actually use some more practice with my proportions? Has this been something that I've been struggling with and would want to improve upon? Sometimes when I create a piece of art, I have stared at it for so long that I don't have a chance to see it with fresh eyes. Sometimes that immediate reaction from a stranger who is seeing your art for the first time can be quite a useful and rare source of feedback, because there might be some small things that jump out at a brand new viewer but slip by undetected to us, the creators, because we were too engrossed in the process to notice. This is why artists often step away from their work and take a few days break and then revisit the work so that we can see it with fresh eyes. So, rather than being offended that someone pointed out a flaw in my work, I can just take the underlying message and ask myself if it's a valid piece of feedback. And usually the comments that sting the most are the comments that I, on some level, already agree with or have already known about myself. I've actually been critiqued on my proportions many times, and honestly, I used to just ignore those comments because they offended me or made me feel insecure. I was afraid to admit that maybe those people were right because it also meant admitting that I was wrong. And to acknowledge that someone else is right while you were in the wrong is kind of like admitting defeat. It makes us feel inferior, weak, and ashamed. Again, it's just part of human nature to feel that way. But now, as I get older and gain some more life experiences, I realize that admitting you are wrong is not a sign of weakness or defeat. Admitting you're wrong is a sign of openness and humility. And it's the first step in growth, in progress, and in self-acceptance. So instead of rejecting an entire comment just because it bruised my ego, or just because the person who said the comment phrased their words in a non-perfect way, I now try to find the helpful piece of feedback buried inside the comment and then use it to help me improve. I think that unless we first allow ourselves to be receptive to feedback and acknowledge our mistakes, we can't ever take the next steps to improve and learn from those mistakes. I used to avoid and block out all negative comments because I didn't want to feel offended by them. But now I discovered that I can easily avoid being offended as long as I can separate the negative feedback into those 3 categories and react to each one accordingly. The 3 types of comments are troll comments, difference in opinion comments, and potentially useful comments. If it's a troll comment, no need to be offended because that person is clearly not worth your time and their opinions don't even matter because all they want to do is be mean to you and get attention from you. So just ignore those. If it's a difference in opinion comment where someone is attacking you for having a different opinion than them, and as long as you're not hurting anyone with your opinion, there's no need to be offended because we are all different. We all have different preferences and experiences, and it's just impossible to please everyone 100% of the time. So there's really no point in even stressing about that. And finally, if it's a legitimate piece of feedback phrased in a rude or offensive manner, we can teach ourselves to not be offended by just focusing our attention on the part that actually matters and filtering out all of the other noise. Even if it's buried in a rude comment, the useful, objective piece of feedback is actually beneficial to us. So it's essentially like finding gold in a pan of dirt. It would be such a waste and pity to throw away the entire pan just because the treasure isn't immediately noticeable. So if I just train myself to ignore the comments that don't actually matter and then learn to find the useful treasure inside the comments that do matter, I can shield myself from feeling offended by any of these comments because I'm getting something useful even out of this negative interaction. And this thought exercise isn't just limited to the scope of sharing art online or receiving negative feedback on social media. I think it can be applied to all the ways that we communicate and receive feedback in our everyday lives, both online and face-to-face. Being more receptive to negative feedback has helped me tremendously in my real life relationships, whether it's my romantic relationship, my close friends, my family members. I feel like when I'm able to put aside my ego and resist the urge to be offended or resist the temptation to just jump straight to the defense in the face of criticism, I can become a better listener and I can learn to apologize and take accountability for mistakes I've made that might have accidentally offended or hurt other people. I think having the ability to process and apply external feedback to our introspective journeys helps us become more empathetic, humble, and well-rounded individuals. And before I wrap up this discussion, I also wanted to clarify that while I think it's important to be able to accept and interpret criticism with humility and self-reflection, it doesn't mean that we have to place too much significance on seeking external validation from others. It's important to find the right balance between not hinging your entire self-worth on the opinions of others, but also not completely writing off everyone who disagrees with you or offers some sort of criticism towards you as people who are just being haters. I feel like real emotional maturity is being able to stay true to who you are and confident in your convictions while still retaining some self-awareness to listen for feedback that can genuinely help you improve. I know that a lot of what I mentioned today is easier said than done, and yes, I recognize that I'm also still a constant work in progress, but being able to see the good in negative comments is a skill that I'm excited to continue working on. And that about sums up today's video. I hope this discussion was thought-provoking or helpful or at least entertaining in some way. I always love to hear your stories and opinions, whether or not they align with my own, so please always feel free to share your honest thoughts with me in the comments if you'd like. Thank you, as always, for listening to me rant for this long, and I'm honestly just so grateful for all of your time and support, especially when I make these long, kind of rambling style videos. Just thank you so much for spending your time here with me and for your patience in listening to me talk for this long. And if you're interested in adopting this painting, I do have the framed original listed in my shop at happyd-artist.com. Also, I've decided to have a spring sale in my shop, so if you want to get 20% off your orders, including originals, please enter the code SPRING at happyd-artist.com, and the sale will end March 31st. And if you're interested in learning more about how to paint and draw, I have lots of art educational content on my Patreon page, including exclusive video tutorials, step-by-step photo tutorials, live streams, podcasts, and even surprise art gift boxes. All available at patreon.com/happydartist. I'd love to have you join my Patreon family. Also, if you want to check out more artworks, works in progress, and just random daily artist adventures, feel free to check out my Instagram, and you can follow me at the handle @happydartist. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!